Thanks. I just want to say I'm so impressed with so many people who are here today. Oh, am I not speaking loud enough?
We need our
Okay, it's hard in this oppressive air. Okay, so I'm introducing Wayne Lempka, who many of you, I'm sure, know. And he's given several programs for the summer series, and it's been wonderful. So, I think without further ado, we better just jump in.
Yeah, the programs are supposed to last, I think, 25 minutes, but I tend to talk a lot, so this will probably go longer. But if it rains, then who knows what happens. We are going to take a little walk today after part 1, because we're going to walk to part 2, which is just down near the physical therapists. So, first of all, I want to thank Patrick Wing, who was my ad hoc research assistant, and he provided me with a lot of information on the Millbrook Inn and the Millbrook Hotel. We're going to first talk about the hotel here. We want to thank Robert McHugh, the president of the Historical Society, who allowed me to come into the archives and look around. I think he wanted to go home and watch the Mets game or the Yankees or something, but he very kindly let me come in and do some research. So today, if you find this talk is not what you're interested in, or it starts to rain, or you have someplace else to go, feel free to leave at any time. You're not going to hurt my feelings. Really great if you silence your cell phones. Good. Also, I am not an expert on either building, so if any of you have information that you would like to share, please feel free to do that, because that would be really great. So last summer I did a talk, and I think some of you attended it, called A Paved Paradise and Put Up a Parking Lot, and we looked at 3 sites in Millbrook where old buildings were taken down and parking lots were put in. Well, today we're going to look at 2 sites. Parking lots were not put in, but we have a firehouse, which is great for Millbrook, and then we have the remnants of another building there. One thing I want to tell you, though, because I see none of you have your laptops, which is really great, because, you know, I find, I'm going off topic a bit, but I find that teaching in college, it's very different today, because every student has a laptop, and you're constantly being fact-checked by students who say, oh, I don't know if that's true, and then they'll fact-check something. So today, you'll have to just go on what I say as being fact. So we're going to start. My talk is called Room Service, the Tale of 2 Hotels. We're going to look at the Millbrook Hotel first, which was on the site of where the firehouse is today. But before we look at the Millbrook Hotel, I want to just talk a bit about the railroad stop, which was actually right here on the Village Green, because the railroad stop here really was what allowed the Millbrook Hotel to be built and to survive. And you think about it, there are a lot of towns that still have a hotel or a hotel-like building near their railroad stop, because you got off the railroad, you needed some place to go to. So the railroad stop, which was right over here, was important for the Millbrook Hotel. But today we're going to see that this talk deals with 2 separate classes of people, and this is what I think is really interesting. The Millbrook Hotel was for the ordinary person. You take a walk a few yards down to the Millbrook Inn, it was for a totally different class of people. So it's kind of like the upstairs, downstairs story, where the basic clientele stayed here in the Millbrook Hotel, and then the others who had lots of money stayed at the Millbrook Inn. So it's kind of amazing how a few blocks can make a big difference. So 1867, the railroad came through Millbrook. We had the railroad station here. Obviously not left, but I thought it was really interesting. The ticket office was the Bank of Millbrook, and I don't know how many of you know that. And the freight depot was Millbrook building, right? And that was a freight depot. But the line was shut down in 1930, and again, that was because of the automobile becoming very popular, and then the roads were becoming much better paved and traveled. So the closing of the railroad site really was the problem for the Millbrook Hotel. But the Millbrook Hotel was originally one building, and I'm going to pass this around. It was a wood structure before the brick addition. And that was, the original hotel was built in 1875, and it was a wood structure at this end of the firehouse. And we're not sure who designed it, we're not sure who built it. It was obviously built by local craftsmen, and it had just a very basic style to it. But in 1876, a man named E.J. Tripp from Bengal opened the Millbrook Hotel, which was this wooden section, a year after it's built, and he calls it a first-class hotel with a bar. And the bar was really important because that attracted a lot of locals to the hotel, whether they stayed there or not. It had a name change. In 1879, the name was changed to the Millbrook House for a little while, and then in 1887, the name changes back to the Millbrook Hotel. In 1895, the stone addition was added on, so it more than doubled the size of the hotel. That is interesting because architectural historians believe that Mr. Ware, who's well known for his architectural buildings in Millbrook, he was the one who probably designed the brick addition, the stone addition, because of the different things that we see, such as the layout of the stairs and the layout of the patio. But again, the stonework was done for the addition by local craftsmen or masons employed by Mead and Taft, which were the stone workers that Ware used for his building. So it could be a Ware building, but we're not really sure, but we pretty much think so. The hotel was really popular for quite a while because you got off the train and then you came to the hotel to stay. In 1890, the hotel was for sale by E.J. Tripp, who was the original owner of the hotel, and he advertised it as a 3-story building with 2 acres of land. So the property actually extended much farther back into the size than we have today. But unfortunately, the patronage of the hotel began to wane in many respects, began to decline, just because there was not as many people using the hotel coming from the train anymore. But there was a lot of interesting things that went on during this time period. One of the interesting facts was that in 1914, because the hotel had a bar, the Millbrook Hotel owner at that point was arrested for selling liquor to go. So it was like you could get your to-go cup there and take it out. So he was arrested for doing that. He was brought to trial. The jury in Millbrook deliberated for about 15 minutes, and he was found not to be guilty for doing that. And E.J. Tripp, the original owner of the hotel, I have a portrait of him here, really interesting person because he had a conversion at one point. And the Women's Temperance Union, who was very much against drinking and alcohol, convinced him to close his bar and to give up drinking. So he decided, he had this renaissance, he decided that he was going to do that. He became their model, their poster child. They wrote up a whole brochure about him, how he stopped drinking, how he closed the bar, but that didn't last for long. And he started drinking again, he opened up the bar, and it's, it's just how it was. But that is kind of an interesting story about him. The Millbrook Hotel did have a restaurant in it. They did serve dinner, lunch and dinner. And here is an advertisement for a special Easter dinner for $1.50. And you could have deviled eggs, you could have chicken breast, you could have pureed black beans. It was a whole interesting selection of things. But the chef at the Millbrook Hotel was just an ordinary chef. We're going to see when we look at the Millbrook Inn that the chef there was much more important. So the hotel, again, had various issues with the bar, and there was a lot of letter writing to the Millbrook Round Table at that point about having the bar closed, and again, the various incidents that went on. So by 1855, the building was now empty. And that was a problem. But I'm sorry. But
1955.
yeah, 1955. But before that, because the hotel patronage was beginning to decline, in 1923, the owner of the hotel decided that they were going to make the hotel into apartments. So the hotel had a rebirth. Not the entire hotel was made into apartments, but at least half of it was made into apartments. And one of the interesting things about that was, for me, was that in 1947, my parents came back to Millbrook from a foreign country, which would have been Poughkeepsie at that time, for my mother, who had lived in Millbrook all her life. And George Whalen, the original, decided that because he wanted my mother to come back and help him out at the insurance company, he converted one of the apartments into one of the sections of the hotel into apartments for my parents. So they lived in the Millbrook Hotel apartments for a number of years until they bought a house in the village. But by 1955, the building was empty. No one seemed to want it. The American Legion decided that they were going to look at it and possibly buy it for their home, and that would have been really interesting if they bought the building, because today they wouldn't be looking for a home, right, because of the Thorn building and having them have to leave their building in the back. But the American Legion looked at the building. By this time, there was not a lot of work that had been done to it. They found it to be in very, very poor shape. They decided not to buy the hotel for their meeting place. So the Tribute Garden steps in. They buy the hotel in 1955. There was plans to make a firehouse. They tear down the hotel in 1956, which was really unfortunate because it was such a great structure. And anything that they could salvage that they sold on the open market. So, I think today, like, what would have happened had the hotel still stood here? There were so many possibilities that could have happened for the hotel. But that didn't happen, so we have some great photographs of the hotel, but there's really very little left. I mean, there's really nothing left, but we do have a firehouse now, which is really important for us to have. But again, the hotel was for the ordinary person. You think about it, there are a lot of places around, a lot of towns that do have hotels, like I said, next to train stations, like in Canaan, Connecticut. Dover, there's still a building next to the railroad station, which was a hotel. So it was really common to have a hotel very close to the rail station. But that's what happened. There was a great decline in people coming into Millbrook. It wasn't the town that it is today, and there was no one coming to the hotel. And again, the apartments, I guess, were slowly declining, so the decision was made to tear down the hotel and build a firehouse. I don't know. Does anyone have any questions on the Millbrook Hotel?
It would be fun to know how in poor condition it was. Like, what,
Yeah.
Are there newspaper articles in that?
There are newspaper articles. What, on the
hotel going down, or
There are some, but it doesn't really say much. It just says that the building was in poor condition and they decided that they were going to tear it down. That's what happened. At that point, people were really thinking about the future and preservation and whatever.
Did you say
I'm sorry.
Did you say how many rooms there were?
At one point, it had 23 rooms. It was fairly large because it was this big stone addition and then the wooden attachment to it. So it was a fairly large hotel. But again, they couldn't fill the 23 rooms after a while. I don't know, from what I read, I don't know if it was ever fully filled with guests just because. And I think that was part of the problem too, because it was too large and there was clientele, but not enough to make it profitable. So they tried all different things to make it.
And did Mr. Tripp hire the architects? Did he construct the building, or did he buy it after it was already constructed?
That's a good question. From what I've read in the newspapers, he is the one that does contract to have the building built, because he saw an opportunity, right? Because the railroad's here, the station opens up, so he decides, well, this is really good to make a lot of money. But he was fairly successful in the beginning, but then after a while, people it declines and into issues.
So you mentioned the inn versus the hotel.
Yes.
What's the difference?
Well, we are going to walk to the inn, but maybe because it's raining, we shouldn't walk to the. What do you think we should do?
Well, I think we, finish up all
Yeah,
that you
talk
wanted to
about
do
it,
here,
yeah.
and then, I think if we could walk to the inn, that would be fine.
Okay. Yeah. Millbrook had two places. They had the Millbrook Hotel, and then they had the Millbrook Inn. And like I said, it was really upstairs, downstairs, because the Millbrook Inn is for all the fancy people that we're going to see. The Millbrook Hotel was for the basic person who got off the train and was just looking for a place to stay overnight.
I don't want to jump ahead on your part, but
Yeah.
talking about Egbert, we're talking about Egbert trip, right? Still
Yeah,
the
yeah,
hotel. So, I just, for Gail trip, I saw this in the paper, and it's, it's right here. It's Egbert Tripp of the Millbrook Inn,
Oh, okay.
1888.
Yeah.
So he just went over there. And then at one point it says something about he's no longer at the Halcyon, or this season he's not at the Halcyon Hall, he's, there. So Egbert Tripp managed, I guess,
I think he was manager of the inn, owner of the hotel.
Okay.
Then had to get a job,
Yeah.
and he became manager of the inn. And he was originally a farmer out in Bengal.
Okay.
My family. I don't have a lot on him, but
And he's on your house related. It's kind of
you have to use the word removed,
okay.
like second cousin removed.
Yeah.
From the original trips that came from Rhode Island. They all came over that way. I never knew them.
So,
Yeah.
anyone else?
Oh, so you want to move to the inn?
Yeah, I thought we would walk if it's not pouring rain at this point. And Part 2 is the Millbrook Inn, and this was the inn for the fancy people. It was the classic upstairs and downstairs. The Millbrook Inn was not for the ordinary traveler, as the Millbrook Hotel was. Like I said, the inn was for the wealthy people. The only thing that survives today is this part of the inn, which was an annex, as you'll see, and that was this little building here. Where you can behind it. So here is the building that we're standing next to, which was the annex. The main hotel was over right in this section over here, and the barn was supposedly an original barn. But when I teach, I like to use a lot of original documentation from what people have said. So I have a number of articles, and sections of articles that I'm going to read to you, because it really gives you the character and the feeling of what it was like to go inside the Millbrook Inn. So, 1888. The inn was incorporated by a board of directors. It included the Oakley Thorne, it included Edward Thorne, it included J.D. Wing, among many other prominent people in Millbrook. So it was a prominent people in Millbrook. People who had the big estates, they were the ones that decided that we needed a place called the Millbrook Inn. So they formed a company, and their goal was to erect and maintain a large summer boarding house in Millbrook. But this was more than just a summer boarding house because it also was used in the winter. This building was designed by James E. Ware, and it was built by Mead and Taft. It was built in the Queen Anne style, which was very typical of that time period in the late 1800s. Queen Anne style has lots of porches, has peaked roofs, has verandas, has a lot of little nooks and crannies all over. I mean, it was an incredible building. So the building opens in 1888, and I'm going to just read you an article about the opening of the building. It opened in September of 1888, and again it was because of the wealthy individuals that formed the corporation. So this was from the Poughkeepsie Journal. It says, the opening of the Millbrook Inn. The formal opening of this quaint and beautiful place of resort was accomplished on Wednesday evening by a dinner given by the company to their family and a few invited guests. The cuisine in the hands of a French chef, so they had a French chef, was unsurpassed. Judging from the menu presented on Wednesday evening, this will become noted throughout the country for its excellent food and its refined, dainty dishes, which so seldom meet the eye even in the very best summer hotels in the country. The china and glass, they had their own china and their own glassware. The china and glass and linen selected with the greatest care and taste on the same luxurious scale with the rest of the house. The hotel is designed for comfort, and the large, airy rooms will be a feature of the place, with broad hallways, wide piazzas, leaving nothing to be desired. So it was quite a fancy place at the time. So again, a fancy dinner was 1888 prepared for a few invited guests by a very famous French chef, but they don't tell you who the very famous French chef was. But anyway, that's something to research and find out. So like I said, the owners of the great estates in Millbrook, they were the ones who would stay here. They would usually come up here before their homes were opened up for the summer. So this was a perfect place for them to stay before everything was opened up. But even the board of directors were hoping that the wealthy would even come up in the winter, and bring their guests and stay here and participate in what was happening in the Millbrook social scene at that point. But it really was used mostly for the summers. By the 1890s, the inn became very popular. That the original building was added onto. It was added on in all directions. There were outbuildings added. There was a bowling alley. There was a billiards room. There was a building for nannies and governesses to stay with children. And the people who stayed at the inn were allowed to play golf at the Millbrook Golf Club, and that was one of the benefits too of staying at the Millbrook Inn. So it was really quite nice. The Millbrook Hotel that we just looked at, they didn't have a billiards room. They didn't have a famous French chef. They did not have these wonderful accommodations like the Millbrook Inn. The barn in the back, which again is original, the barn in the back was most likely built by Samuel Thorne, from what I've researched, and he was one of the inn's investors. And again, it was most likely designed by James Ware. Supposedly, this annex was moved a little bit, I think, forward when the hotel was torn down. But I read that somewhere, but I find that kind of hard to believe. So I'm not really sure. But in some documentation, you'll read that this annex was moved after the main hotel was
Well, one of the chimneys is gone.
Hmm?
One of the chimneys is gone. One of the chimneys is gone.
Oh, and the...
I think the picture shows two chimneys.
Yeah, there were two chimneys, yeah. But it has that classic Ware style with the pointed column, the pointed roof, which again was very Queen Anne style. So yes, this was part of the hotel, the annex. Around 1913, New York State cut their road through the south, the hill south of the hotel. Again, because here today we have our highway, so that cutting the road in here really did lead to the downfall. But by 1920, patronage begins to fail also. Again, people are not staying here. The train is not bringing people, although most people who came to the hotel did come in private coaches or whatever. But there was, like I said, they had their own china. Here's a menu from the hotel, the Millbrook Inn, for just a typical dinner that was served on Thursday, May 29th. 1924, they had lobster Newburg, roast shoulder of lamb with mint jelly, roast Long Island duckling, carrots and peas and cream, asparagus tips, parsley potatoes, julienne potatoes, Waldorf salad, coffee, dessert, etc., etc. It was quite a nice menu for that time period. People could come into the Millbrook Inn and patronize the dining room, but most of the guests in the dining room were inn residents. They're trying to keep the hotel going, and in 1937 there was this very mysterious man, and I call him mysterious because I can't seem to find who he is. He's just referred to as this man, who is considered to be the inn's savior. And he comes from Dallas, Texas, to take over the management, but he died very mysteriously 6 months later, so I'm not sure it was from the French cuisine or what it was, but there's really something weird about how he just seems to die 6 months later. And then a mysterious woman buys the buys the inn, but that could be Mrs. Lamont, right, which you were telling me about.
It was in the newspaper. So that person died in January, I think, 37.
Yeah.
Came in 36.
Yeah, he came in 36.
Yeah.
Died in January 37.
And I don't know if, Jonathan, you and I were looking at that, or if it was Robert.
You and I looked up.
We were looking up all sorts of things, and I think we saw his name, but I don't remember either. But it's hard to dig into it.
Yeah.
But he was apparently from this area to begin with, but then had been around down in Dallas managing hotels and stuff.
Yeah, he was a hotel manager.
Yeah.
That I know.
I mean, so that's pretty interesting in 1937, just going back a generation. But it says that, so this is by April 1937, the Bank of Millbrook is taking down the buildings on the Millbrook Inn land before turning the property over to the purchaser, Mrs. Lamont Robbins.
Okay.
So Lamont Robbins, Lamont.
The Lamont family
Yeah.
was one of the wealthy families in
And it says Mrs. Robbins does not intend to build on the land for 2 or 3 years.
Oh.
That's it.
Mrs. Robinson really never built on the land in the end.
And Wayne, excuse me, but the railroad track was behind the garage, correct?
That I don't know.
Yes.
It probably.
This was
I think
not a road.
Yeah.
Right, this was not a road, so it must have run.
It ran it right up in front of the firehouse. The
Yes,
track.
it did. So it would have had to
How
go
long
that
behind
way.
the hotel?
So was
the
this
inn?
the front
Yes,
or the
it was
back?
going behind.
Was this the front
This
or
was
the
the
back
this was the front of the annex.
of the annex? But
Yeah.
the hotel faced
No, the hotel faced out here.
out here.
Yeah, it faced out this way.
Was
So
there,
it
there was no
overlooked
road
the
at all?
Yeah, there was. You're right.
There was no road.
No, there was no road at the
Not until the mid-60s.
Right,
This
right.
went in.
1860s.
1960s.
Yeah.
After 60.
Well,
after
67
1960,
is when it was moved from the monument.
Oh, the road.
Yeah.
This one, yes.
Just
that makes
past here,
sense.
it used to go down to the...
But it came up from the monument and went through here.
That's right.
the
Yeah,
old
this
road, the old
pre-existed.
road did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Came through Bennett, curved around like I talked about.
Yeah, it's kind of confusing, like where the the railroad and then the road and then New York State decides to build a road and there we have a deer fawn that's running around.
Stuart has a question.
Well, it's not so much a question, but to answer that about the train, I don't. Yeah, the cutout is it's behind the barn. It's not right next to the barn, but there is a rock cutout, and so on the way over here, there's the access road to, like, if you were to go to like the maintenance garage, and then there's the driveway for the physical therapy place. That strip of grass that's between there, it's a lot of it's filled in now with sticks and such, but that is the original train bed. So that going across the green is roughly where it would have been station-wise. I would assume it would have been on the left side, but also at the same time, Front Street used to be wider. So it could have been on either side of it. But yeah, the cutout is right behind the building. There's not much left of it. Obviously, after the train was shut down, they took all the rails out for the war effort shortly thereafter. And you know, the only thing that really survived so far that I've been able to find is just the fact that there was the deliberate cutting through the rock, and there's you know, there's still remnants of where you can see where they didn't stuff the piece of dynamite all the way down into the hole they drilled. So there's perfectly cylindrical, like, circles in some of the rock face, but other than that, there's unfortunately not much left of it. So
was there, I'm sorry, but
yeah, go ahead.
thinking, was there not a car, because the hotel and the inn both were on the track, one on this side and one on this side?
I haven't been able to figure out anything about that, how this would have been connected to that. I would assume because the stop was there, maybe they had a path for people to walk on, or maybe a short access kind of road just to come here, because like we know this road wasn't here at the time.
It goes behind the golf course. It goes right along the
It goes, yeah, it goes essentially right between the golf course and the properties. So down behind the village groomer over here, there's a small pond, and I actually asked somebody who works there, and it's still there, is a bridge over that pond where the train would have crossed over that. So it cut through what is now a bunch of people's backyards, which makes it...
Do you think you can get to some of that by the Bennett Trail, the new Bennett Trail? Can we see some of that?
I tried.
And I looked.
I doubt it, just because the actual location of where that is to that would be required. I think it'd have to go through part of the golf course to get to it, or through like the apartments, just because it's between properties now. So if you look on the there's a website that the local government has called the Parcel Access, and it allows you to see the individual parcels of land, and every single one around the track, the old track bed, is owned by one person or another. So it's all surrounded now by private property if it's not already included on the private property. So the small section of grass that I pointed out before there, that between those two roads, that's actually its own parcel that's owned by the town. It's not owned by any one person, so it's part of the town's property. But currently it's just been used, from what I can see, of just people pushing like brush into it.
Well, they opened, I think, 1901
As a hotel.
as a hotel.
Yeah,
It was either the late
88 or
19th
92 or something. It
century,
opened
early
as a
20th.
a hotel, luxury resort.
Yeah.
So they have three in town.
Yeah, well, unless 90. So maybe Halcyon came first. Well, maybe the hotel was first. This might be the hotel was first, and then Halcyon.
Then Halcyon, and then this.
That Donald, that
Going on that way, you can see all the different lines,
put up,
like the
but they
raised bed
didn't
that
last
had
very long,
up.
like 2 or 3 years.
But also you realize it had to be.
They weren't getting inaccessible.
So it would have crossed.
Which said, the Millbrook Inn is to be enlarged twice its present size in the fall of 1890, to accommodate its rapidly increasing patronage. So many people were staying here. There was an article in the Poughkeepsie Eagle News, which is what it was called in 1891. It's called The Millbrook Inn.
Oh my goodness sakes.
So I just want to read you this because it kind of gives you a feeling of what it was like. So it says, The submarine at Millbrook Inn is magnificent and pleasant. The morning and evenings are cool. The guests amuse themselves during the day by driving. There being many beautiful drives in this section of the county, such as Deep Hollow, Turkey Hollow. These drives are the most picturesque, and they're the most wild, and they're the most traveled. And sometimes travelers and guests will go to Terrell Lake because that is often visited. The guests amuse themselves otherwise with playing tennis, ball and football. Bowling is a cheap evening occupation. Once a week the guests have a wits party with refreshments, and every Saturday evening they have a German. I don't know what that means, they have a German, but and I tried to look that up and I have a German, so something. The house is entirely filled with not a single room to spare. We frequently have driving parties from Poughkeepsie and surrounding counties here on Sundays. Then it lists like a lot of the guests who came. In the Poughkeepsie Eagle in 1892, it says, of all the resorts in the county, Millbrook is becoming one of the most attractive. The Millbrook Inn, with its additional annex recently furnished, was never more crowded with wealthy New York people, mostly all prominent in society. Then it lists like all these very prominent people in society at that point. The principal amusements are riding and driving on the roads that are kept in excellent condition, tennis, croquet, bowling, fishing, and every week there is a hop with music featured by the Schofield Orchestra. So they had quite a time there.
And that was before it was a village.
Yes, it was, right.
This is when it was a stop.
But you know, not everyone is happy at the Millbrook Inn. Because on October 25th, the Poughkeepsie Eagle had a story. It says, "Stormbound at the Millbrook Inn." There was a gloomy lot of ladies and gentlemen at the Millbrook Inn Friday morning, although all the inside surroundings of this hospitable summer house were bright and cheery. The heavy nor'easter was the occasion for the sadness. Fires were burning in the parlors and the reception rooms of the inn, and the handsome rooms were filled with ladies and gentlemen who now and again stepped to the window, flattened their nose against the window panes as they peered out over the rain-drenched county, and listened to the howling wind without a beat. And then the paper then lists all the people who were disappointed, and they had to stay at the inn. And then it says, lunch was partaken at 1:30 in the inn's dining room. The afternoon was spent in social conversation. The majority of the party at the inn that day decided to remain overnight, not caring to venture out into the muddy road. So people were happy, but people were not happy because they wanted to go out and have fun at the Millbrook Inn. There's lots of interesting things. They talk about the china and glass and linen were selected for the greatest care and taste, that as good as you'll find in any place in New York City, at any of the New York City's most attractive hotels. The Millbrook Hotel is on equal footing with all these New York City hotels. So it was